Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening to what's now called, well, for at least for another week or so, Clark County Today Sports Podcast with me, reporter Paul Valencia, and our school administrators with an inside look at high school sports, Tony Liberatore. Did I say that right, Tony? I'm going to say that every day. And Cale Piland. We appreciate your feedback from the first episode. Here's our second episode. Today, we're going to talk signing day. We'll talk about sportsmanship. Got to mention the 50-point game by Brooklynn Haywood of Union. We'll be doing coaching changes for football, Heritage, and Columbia River. A shout out to Ryland Spencer from Cascadia Preps, and then our Super Bowl picks if we have time. I'm sure we'll make time.
Thank you. Yes, we will make time for the Super Bowl picks.
Yes. So how you guys doing?
Good. It's been a good week.
Good. Awesome,
Thank you.
Awesome. And let's see here. Signing day was today, and so for football, and then schools nowadays, they take this day, or even I think Evergreen's going to do it in March, where they take all of their athletes from all sports and put them all on stage at once. But I'm old school. This is football signing day traditionally, and
yes.
So and you know. Got a couple guys, Kyle Chen and Jacob Martin of Mountain View. They're both going to the Air Force Academy. Yep. That's special.
That's very special.
And so, Cale, I wanted to ask you, did you ever have an athlete go to one of the military academies?
No, I actually never had anybody sign with a military academy. I had a number of athletes who were recruited by the military academy, and Air Force in particular does a really good job in this area. Their presence is really kind of pronounced. But it's just such a different decision for a lot of kids, when you're making your college choice, going to an academy versus going to just a regular comprehensive university or college. So kudos to those guys. I mean, that's a lifestyle choice.
Absolutely. Tony, you were with Columbia River for years, and you've been with Vancouver schools for years. Do you know
same as Cale. The only, nothing as a coach, as an AD, this is kind of a weird situation. We had a River student sign with Air Force Soccer. He never played for Columbia River Soccer. He was all club.
Oh, gotcha.
So and I didn't know, and the parents just said, hey, our son is signing with Air Force for soccer. Can he be part of the signing day? And that's the one we did in June, I think, when we kind of lumped a lot of the kids together. But
right.
But we did have a lot of recruiting. I think Cale, Air Force was definitely a presence. It's the furthest west and all that. So,
well, as a former Army soldier, I got to say, go Army. And I actually went to West Point once, but no, I was never smart enough to attend West Point. But when I was stationed at Fort Drum, New York, I went down to an Air Force Army football game and wrote a couple of stories on that. And if you've ever been to West Point, it's special. And it's I know the country's only a couple hundred years old. The place looks like it's 500 years old.
Oh, sure.
In a great way, in a wonderful way.
Well, and it was, you go back, it was the site of West Point was a fort in the, my history teacher coming out now.
There you go.
In the Revolutionary era. So there you go.
And then you go to Air Force Academy and everything is all modern. It's just, they're complete opposite. They might as well be 200 years apart, not just 2,000 miles apart.
Right.
But it's fascinating. So congratulations to those guys. Going to go play some football for Air Force. Other potential signings, I'm just going to do a few names just to give a little shout out. Jonathan Landry, Evergreen. And these are potential signings. When we're recording this, we think they signed today or are going to or have at least made commitments. Eastern Washington for Jonathan. Jonathan Stromberg, tight end from Skyview, going to Idaho. Jalen Salavea, Skyview, going to Portland State. Ty Evans from Skyview, going to Central Washington. Joe Merlino of Union is going to Central Washington. Adam Watts of Columbia River, I believe, said yes to Idaho State.
Okay.
And I know I'm missing a few other guys out there. And
the only one that I remember off the top of my head was also Mountain View's quarterback.
Mitch
Johnson.
I saw that on Twitter.
Central
Washington, right? Yeah, that's really good for him. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And then I just saw this on Twitter, and I was actually in Mindy Williams Cleland's school classroom at Skyview today. Well, her son is the biggest Vancouver signing as far as Power 5 conference. Royce Cleland is going to the University of Washington. He's just a Jesuit kid, so he goes to school at
his first 2 years were at Skyview, if I remember correctly.
Yes, they were. And his parents, Cam Cleland, tight end in the NFL, and then Mindy was a two-sport athlete in the Pac-10. So
It's pretty good.
That's pretty darn good. I always tell people that she's the best athlete at Skyview High School.
And she's a YouTube legend before social media, right? She is the one that hit the foul ball in, it might have been the NCAA College Softball World Series or just a home game for Washington. But anyways, she hits the foul ball and hits the guy on the bike. So that was on the Sports Center, like way back when. Like, so we're going.
I never knew that one. That's
so
awesome.
if you look it up, it's got like 10 million views or something. So.
Right. So about signing day, get you guys' expert analysis, or not analysis, but just, hey, Cale, you had an interesting signing from the 2004 state championship Evergreen team. Taylor Rank went to the SEC, played at South Carolina. I know there was a connection between Taylor's dad and Steve Spurrier. I remember something about that. But I have to wonder, did Spurrier actually ever come to Vancouver?
He did not. That was there's not a lot of kids from the Vancouver area heading to.
Is he the last one? The SEC?
I think so. I can't remember anybody else going to the SEC.
It's been 20 years for sure. Yeah.
And that was an Taylor's recruiting was pretty interesting. He was actually he got an early offer to the University of Washington, and they were taking him as a receiver, and called. That year UW was not good. And Randy Hart, who had recruited this area for a long, long time, called, and he used some colorful language when I had him on the phone, not at me, but he was angry that they were doing this, but they were pulling the offer from Taylor.
Wow.
Basically because he said, we're not any good right now, and we have to go get some JC talent. And Taylor hadn't formally accepted the offer yet. So he was then recruited by a lot of big Sky schools, and in fact had taken a visit to Montana State and had texted me when he got home and basically said, yeah, I think this is where I want to go. I'm going to commit. And then Spurrier got hired at South Carolina, and Steve had been the receivers coach at Georgia Tech when Taylor's dad had played there. So that's where the connection was. And Spurrier's son called him, and there had been some buzz around Taylor. His performance in the state championship game had elevated that buzz, and they offered him and he accepted on the spot. Didn't take a visit. He had lived in Georgia, so he was moving back to the East Coast was not a big deal for him. But yeah,
or as they say, the South.
Yes.
You'll get in trouble for calling that East Coast.
Well, yeah, that's my West Coast bias, my Pacific Northwest bias. So he committed, but no, Coach Spurrier never made the trek out here. Right. Taylor didn't push the recruiting that far.
There's a great photo of Taylor scoring a touchdown with the student section behind him, and it's just so cool that a guy from Vancouver scored a touchdown in the SEC. I just think that's really neat. And he wasn't a star running back. He had a good career, and I think he was really good at special teams.
Yep.
But he did get one start, and he had 100 yards in that start. And I remember there's all kinds of details of why he got that start with some guys in front of him, maybe not following some rules, but he did it. And so he wasn't a huge star, but he made it to the SEC, and he performed an hour. Then he went into that ultra strength man or CrossFit training. The guy's the fittest man in the world. So anyway, I'm rambling. But hey, so was it? Help me out. The former Notre Dame coach who's now at LSU is Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly. Yeah. Okay, I did right there. Yeah. He was in Vancouver last year when it was leaked that he was leaving Notre Dame.
Yep.
So he was actually here recruiting one of our athletes, Tobias Merriweather.
Yep.
But so what other big name coaches can you recall coming to Vancouver schools, for Tony?
Well, just personally, and that was a good question because I had to, going back to River, the biggest ones that I remember, and these aren't that big anymore, but when River had some dudes, Tyrone Willingham, when he was at Stanford, he was coming to see both Brett Pierce and Billy Knotts. Right. And then at that same time, WSU, so Mike Price, Mike Levenseller. You also asked us, Paul, some of our favorites, and Kel mentioned Randy Hart.
Yep.
And Randy Hart, when I was AD, this was right before he retired. He was at Stanford. So he coached at Washington for 20 plus years, a college assistant for over 40, and has participated as an athlete and then as a coach 10 Rose Bowls.
Wow.
And he remembered my name, and I'd met with, just like in passing. and he came in and would just talk, and we talk about River, and I mean he was close with Coach O. So Randy Hart would be my favorite, but we didn't have, now, and we talked a little bit about this prepping for the show, which is the recruiting has changed. Because I saw, I think Lincoln Riley came to Evergreen.
Yes.
About 2 weeks ago. That's
Okay.
huge.
Oh, yeah.
And when you're starting to see, to get USC's head coach to set foot in Clark County, that's big.
Yeah.
I mean, the Northwest guys would all the time.
Right.
But you're so I don't know if he was coming up to see Nike too.
Yeah.
But that's big.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Yeah, and you'll see a lot of that too, especially with guys that get to new programs in new areas, right? So he wants to make his presence felt up here. And let's be honest, Clark County, as far as a talent hotbed, is different than it was even 5 years. I mean, there are guys here every year now that they need to make sure that they've got a foothold in our region, because there'll be players that they're going to want.
In fact, a guy also on that 2004 team, Cale, Greg Peach, ended up Eastern Washington, right?
Eastern Washington.
But then he played 10 years in the CFL. I mean, so obviously a talented guy.
Peach was a beast.
Yeah,
Peach was a beast.
But under-recruited.
Oh, we had to browbeat Eastern Washington into kind of upping his package a little bit, because we were like, you don't understand how good this kid is going to be. And he was a blank slate. I mean, he you could see the explosiveness and everything, but Greg, I mean, he had a lot of weight that he had to put on when he got there. And once that weight came on, I mean, he was the defensive line. I forget the name of the trophy for the FCS, but he was he
was a national player.
The national defensive lineman of the year. So he was one heck of a player.
Yep, nice guy too. All right, now we're gonna switch subject here to sportsmanship, and this has been going on for years. These scores that get out of hand in certain sports, and basketball is a big one. And this year in the state of Washington, Oakville beat Mary M. Knight in basketball, 107-4, 107-4. And I've heard some internet rumors that they changed their schedule around. That I could never get confirmation of what actually has happened. But they're trying to fix that before they go into the postseason. But I just kind of wanted to ask you guys, your thoughts as administrators and former coaches. How do you combat this when the scores are just getting that crazy? Cale, we'll go with you, Cale.
Yeah. To me, and I don't know the specifics of that situation. I don't know what was going on with Miriam Knight, but to me, it's really inexcusable. I don't know how you do that, and because even there has to be ways. Even if you're just going to tell at that point in time, telling your team not to shoot. I know there's some people on the other side of it that say that that's more demoralizing than having them run the score up to that extent. But that's not good. That's not good for high school athletics. It's just it's not. And so it would be very difficult for me to really understand or to get an acceptable explanation of how that took place. And if that truly was the best that they could do, then what they've decided to do and not play those games, I mean, there's no reason that game should be played.
Right. Tony?
Yeah, it's very similar. I would want to know, some very specific. Are they still pressing?
Right.
Are they? Did you? How long were the starters in?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different factors. But and I know that you tried to confirm. I also texted some people just to see, and I haven't got any sort of confirmation yet. But I think the league did step in, and that's what you alluded to. And and I think that's important. And and Kel and I. This just popped in my head. Last year, Kel and I had to work on a sportsmanship thing.
Was that softball?
Yeah,
yeah.
And I had known Cale, and I was just filling in because my boss asked me, because our AD wasn't on site at that time. He was he's taking some personal days and whatnot, and so it was just one of those things. And Kel was like, "Hey, this is what happened, and this is what we're going to do," and.
Right. Well,
so I trusted that.
I think 107-4 in basketball is 10 times worse than 25-1 in softball, but or whatever it was in softball.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming you did talk to your coach, you did talk to the AD of that school. What happened, right? Right, Cale? And you do get, you get the facts before you make any decisions.
Yeah,
Correct.
you investigate it and you look into what precautions were taken place. It took place, and could some things have been done better? And is it a learning opportunity? Absolutely. Right. But in talking with that wasn't a situation where the coach was just being blatant and trying to was trying to have what happened happen. She had taken some very definite steps during the contest that weren't as effective, I think, as everybody would have liked them to have been.
Right.
But so you do have to look at those situations. But a lot of times, now speaking as a former coach, you have a pretty good idea if you're going into a contest that's going to be as lopsided as that one was going to be. And so you should be taking precautions like from the start. Who are we starting? Who are we trying to run sets for? You can do some things when because 107-3 is that or 4
whatever.
They were in single digits.
That the talent discrepancy is going to be so massive that you could have played. You need to have a plan going into the game to try to avoid that from happening.
Exactly. I don't even understand it because there is a running clock in high school basketball.
Yeah.
So I don't even know how you can get to 107 unless you're trying to. And let's face it, they must have been trying to. But it's interesting. We talk. Obviously you're part of a volleyball family. There are no issues in volleyball because there's a set score you go to, and if you beat someone 25-2 or 25-2, 25-4, 25-2, it's just over. The game's over.
Yes.
The match is over.
Yes.
But in basketball, it's a time. Football, we have running clock, but football seems to have worked it out. Most football seems to work it out. You get to running clock, and it goes really
Some varsity
fast.
still is probably an issue.
Yeah.
But I think varsity level around here, I think the coaches have, and we talked about that last week about scheduling. I think the coaches around here now have worked a lot of the varsity schedule out.
When the one sport where there aren't any precautions and it really is a clock that runs is soccer.
Yep.
And in fact, I know James Ensley from Fort Vancouver tried to write an amendment last year that didn't get supported, but was trying to put in some sort of mercy rule for soccer as well, because we do really need one. I mean, it's there are, you see some soccer scores where you just scratch your head and go. And the problem is with soccer, like you can look at a score and it's 8-0, 9-0, and that to some people that don't know anything about soccer, 9-0. I mean, that's not that big a deal. 9-0 in soccer, I mean, that's like 63-0 in football.
Right.
So.
Right. And it's and also the talent level even within leagues. So it's not like you can play a non-league. We're not going to play this game. Well, if it's league, I mean, sometimes fortunate. It's in the number one team in a league is so much better than the last place team. But I don't know. I just wonder if we need in volleyball. There's a spot where the darn game ends. If you get to a point, why can't we do that for football and basketball? We have running clock at football at 40 points. I think it's basketball's 35 points. But in basketball, if you get up by 50, why don't you just end the game? I mean, I'm just throwing that out there. Because you're not coming back from a 50-point
Paul,
game.
I think you're larger. I think at least, on the as the AD side or maybe even the coach side, this is those things where, and I've seen it work, where leagues work together or the league schools really work together and just say, we shouldn't be playing JV or we shouldn't be playing this game. Now this league is reacting to that score. So I'm just curious because there's postseason ramifications. Clearly they're good.
Right.
And so I don't know. And I'm sure, Cale will hear District 4 will come up with something, and that's not for us to talk about right now, but they'll come up with some sort of solution that supports both schools or all the schools.
I actually should point that out to our listeners that there are some things you two are not allowed to talk about just yet, especially if it's something that is coming up in the next week or two. In the WIA,
it may be on the
eligibility
District 4
and the district
agenda,
stuff.
So I don't know. I don't see it anymore.
I would imagine it's going to be this month. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, let's do a little bit more. A little bit more local. We'll do Brooklynn Haywood, freshman from Union, scored 50 points. And I did just a little bit of research with. You guys remember Kevin Greenwood by chance?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he used to keep all the basketball records for Clark County up to about 2003, 2004. So he sent me a bunch of records, and there's been a handful of boys who have cracked the 50-point mark. And then just recently from Fort Vancouver, Khalil Singleton got 55.
Just
a couple
signed
years
with Holy
ago.
Cross, coincidentally.
Yeah. So Holy Cross. That's awesome for him. And but we've had some 50-pointers. We cannot recall a 50-point score in girls basketball. So I'm not saying it's a record because I don't know, but definitely rare air. And
Well, I was racking
Tony?
my brain to go back with. So some of the Mountain View, remind me, your era.
Well, a little after my.
Didn't she go to Oregon?
It was
What was
a little
her
after, little after my era. Angelina.
Okay.
Wolbert was her name.
She was incredible.
Now. She's actually elementary school principal for us.
Oh, okay.
In Evergreen School District now, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, she was an inside player, so the 3-point shot wasn't available to her.
Right.
And Corinne Wilson was part of that team too. Who was she was a longtime girls basketball coach at Heritage High School, and she could shoot. I don't know if Corinne ever had 50.
Right.
But that would have been like mid-90s.
Right. And so the only other one that I remember, and she's maybe a year or two older than me, was Lori Merlino.
Okay.
And she went to Fort, coincidentally, played at UW, and but I don't remember 50.
Yeah.
And that was before the 3, but she could score.
Right.
And she, was probably a top 5 all-time GSHL player.
Yeah.
But 50 in a high school game for any level, 32-minute game.
None of the Prairie Girl, no corrals.
Well, Ashley was, I think, 37 or maybe 40, and Heather was more of an all-around. So never got into that range. And we've had some 40-point games, but I just can't think of a 50 for a girl. So congratulations to Brooklyn.
Made their run. I guess that was more of a team too.
Brooke Bowen was so she could get 25, but 50 is just
That's a lot
different
of points.
world. And I'm gonna go on a little defense here. I told you guys I would. So I met Brooklyn and her parents. I spent about 2 hours in their living room in December. I've never written a profile this big on an athlete who had never played a game yet in high school sports. But that's how big she was in club ball across the country. 50,000 Instagram followers for this 8th grader at the time, because she's that good of a shooter, that good of a potential basketball player. Division I scholarship offers before she played a high school game. So I wanted to get to know her, and I'm glad I did. She's really, really nice. And, she's a basketball player, but she's also just, she's a teen girl who just, loves basketball and enjoys being around friends and stuff. But it's funny. So everyone was writing about the 50-point game, and on social media you get the trolls and the people going, "Oh, she did that against a 2B school, LaConner."
Right?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, LaConner is a top 5, top 10 team in 2B, and they're looking for competition. They want to go. They go on the road. They beat Skyview the very next day, so they're not a bad basketball team.
Right.
They're just 2B.
Yep.
And then I want to just scream out, it's still a varsity basketball game. What are you doing criticizing someone who has the ability to score 50 points and then it doesn't matter who she played. She still had to make the basket.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I get a little defensive on that, and I acknowledge maybe I'm too close to it because I met the family and I really really like Brooklyn. But yeah, 50 points is special, and I was glad to. I ended up doing a follow-up article on Clark County Today. I talked to Gary Mills, head coach of Union, that night.
Oh, you did?
And it was just he called it video game numbers, ridiculous, all that stuff, and it was just a sight to behold. Or is that how you say
Yes.
it? Yeah.
But again, 32-minute game, and she's got 50.
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
I mean, I don't care what level.
So I'm just trying to think. We've had some really good. We've had Union's had some okay basketball teams. They're not considered a great program in girls basketball now, but nobody's done 50 at Union. I can tell you that.
I can verify that.
Yeah, that one I know. That one I know. So it's at least a school record, but I still think it might even be a bigger. It might be a whole county record for all I know.
Right.
All right, we also had some coaching changes in football. That happens every year, but at Heritage statistically, sorry, Cale, I know you're the Evergreen School District athletic director, but Heritage statistically had its worst season of in its history. Yeah, it just Sorry, I'm trying to sugarcoat.
No, they struggled this year.
It,
Yes,
but
yeah.
yeah. So, their coach resigned, and then you guys have hired Kevin Peterson, who has been teaching at Heritage since 2004. He's been an assistant coach for many of the years. But what I also love about it is he took some time off, family commitments and things like that. So he's not burned out. But he's still been a teacher the whole time at Heritage, so he knows the challenge, and he also knows how awesome it's going to be when it turns around. But I was going to ask you, Cale, I don't know how much – I know Jason Castro, the AD at Heritage, is in the hiring process. I'm sure you're a part of it. I don't know. Yep. But what are you looking for when you're hiring a coach?
Oh, man. So when you're looking for a head coach, and I tell folks this all the time, being a head coach – It truly is one of those jobs that you can't fully understand until you do it. Simply because it's just when you sit in that chair, it's a different view from that chair than it is from the assistant role. So obviously, you're looking for people that are passionate about kids and want to treat kids right. They have a passion for the place that they're going to be in. Mm-hmm. Because that's super important. I tell you can tell a coaching interview is over about 5 to 10 minutes in if I've heard the word "I" about 10, 15 times.
Yep. Okay, that's a good point.
When I was here, I won this and I won that. Well, no, we won this and we won that. So that's a big deal. But you're also looking for somebody who has a vision. It's kind of like Tony, in working with teachers, when you have a teacher that you're helping plan for the year. Don't focus on what you're doing first. Don't focus on the first 2 weeks. Where do you want your kids to be at the end? Right. And how am I going to get them there? Well, it's the same. It's the same with coaching. It's really the same skill set. So you have to have a vision and a plan. So. What I want to hear is what is a kid going to say to me after they've been in your program for 4 years? How are they going to describe that? Because that is what you're focused on. What we're going to do here in year one should be focused on what are these kids going to say when they leave our program.
Interesting.
And you absolutely, obviously for Kevin, it's a little bit easier because he's been in the program, he's been in the school. So having a plan. Mm-hmm. You need to have a plan as to what you're going to do. So if you're in the school, obviously you have some advantages in what that plan should look like. But if we're interviewing you and it's coming from you're coming from out of district or out of the area, you still should be doing your research and have an idea of what is the boys basketball program at Mountain View High School? No, JC's good. We're not hiring there, but what if that were the program, if we were interviewing for that and you were coming from California, well, you should have an idea as to what the program is about. So that interview team feels like if we hire Tony Liberatore, we got an idea of what that's going to look like.
Cool. And Tony, you were an AD at Columbia River, so you hired coaches, and now you're an administrator at Fort Vancouver. You hired
just
teachers.
Coincidentally, I sat in on a couple of head coaching interviews last week. We want what Cale was saying, those well-rounded individuals and to fit in. And I think I have met Kevin a couple times just then as a coach. And I think Heritage got what I would call like a rolling start, because what I was always worried about as an AD is to get the head coach into the building. Mm-hmm. Teaching wise. Right. And, that's when at least on my side, I would work with Cale's counterpart in our district, Mick Hoffman or then Albert Alcantar. What can we do? Especially if they weren't a teacher. Sometimes it was a little bit easier. If they weren't a teacher, we could find something in the district, depending on their level of education and experience. If they were a teacher, it's just the nature of the business now. I mean, it's a given. Hey, a head coach we got to get him in the building, and you can't do that as often as you want. So I applaud, that Jason and Kevin. I mean, he knows Heritage, and that's huge.
He's Mr. Timberwolf.
Yeah. Kevin Peter. So that's what I would always look for. I have to get you in the building.
Right. And speaking of Columbia River, Brett Smedley resigned as football coach last week. Get this. He coaches a varsity sport in the fall, football. His wife, Brianne, coaches volleyball in the fall, and they both have 2 young children. So, Brett told me last week that it's just time. He needs to, someone needs to focus a little bit more. Well, they just needed time away from the sport. And I got to go with you, Cale, because you have a very interesting. You know this all too well because your wife Lori is also a volleyball coach, and you both were at Evergreen in 2003 or 2004. You were both league champions, I think, undefeated or whatever. I mean, it was, you guys were going crazy, volleyball and football at the same time. Tell me what that's like to pull that off.
Yeah, we lived it. Well, for us, it was easier because we hadn't had any kids yet, and so my daughter was born in 2005, and so we had coached together simultaneously. For 2, 3, 4 years before she was born. And then Lori, she hung on for a couple of years after that. And it was really, I knew on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I wasn't hanging around in the locker room after practice. I was bolting home and taking Allie, and she was taking off to go get to her game on time. So once you have kids, so I definitely understand the motives behind this, because it just makes it much more challenging. When we didn't have kids, I was at her games, she was at my games, and it was fun, and we were both busy. We were super busy at the same time, so it really worked. But you can't both be super busy at the same time once the families start.
Right, and then so Lori left volleyball for a while you still remained in football.
Yep.
Then, as I tell everyone, you got demoted to admin and left football.
Yes.
And then Lori returned to coaching, if I recall. So I mean, it worked out. So Brett, there's hope for you. There's hope for you, Brett Smedley, that you'll be able to get back eventually. But yeah, Brianne's a 2-time state champion volleyball coach, so she's not going anywhere. So I think so. Hey, another one that Cale's going to have to take a little bit more than you, Tony,
That's
just
okay.
because. But Ryland Spencer, high school football fans, players, coaches, you all know who Ryland is. I believe he changed the way football was covered in this state, and for the good. A lot of passionate people write about or scout players from their area. Even me in Southwest, I focus on Southwest Washington in my career in the last 20 years, but I don't do the state. Ryland took that to the whole state level and then made Cascadia Preps what it is. And anyway, I just loved it. I loved him. Rankings, writings, podcasts, and he just celebrated the athlete, the players. So he was great at it. Well, this week he announced he's stepping away. So, and I got a chance to talk to Ryland yesterday, and I gave him my opinion of why he might be stepping away, and so I'm going to go a little rant here, just a bit, but it's high school sports is a passion of mine. I think it's pretty clear. Anyone who knows me knows I love this stuff. But the last couple of years since the pandemic, it changed me, and we talked a little bit about this in the first episode, and it's some fans are just taking it way too seriously, going after officials, coaches, and sometimes even journalists. And I'm not saying Ryland, it was affecting him totally, but Ryland put his name on rankings, and stuff like that. I don't do that because I just can't. I'll be honest. I have too thin a skin of that. And too many people get mad at rankings or predictions. Well, Ryland would do that, and I just guessed that maybe too many people were just giving him a hard time on it because you can't be right all the time. It's the guessing game. It's sports. But in my opinion, it's supposed to be fun. You're supposed to have fun arguments. It's sports. But too many people were taking it seriously, and there's a lot of other things going on. And all he said was, I don't disagree with what I said. And so, but anyway, Ryland, we love you, and I just think you made this state better for football coverage for all of us. So best of luck to you. But Cale, how long have you known Ryland?
So I've known Ryland since, that would have been the 2000 football season. So when we were going through our bios last week, I kind of quickly said that I'd left the district for a year and was a head football coach up in the Seattle area, and that was at Juanita High School. And Ryland was a member of that football team. So I got a chance to coach Ryland my 1 year up there in Seattle. And I echo your sentiments, Paul. He's been really good for the state. And I always appreciated that Ryland also covered everything within the state. So it wasn't just covering, 4A, 3A football. He covered every level of football.
The definition of a junkie.
Yes. Yeah.
We're talking 60, 70, 80 games a year he'd go to.
Right.
Yep.
Well, and what was good, Paul, and you alluded to this, what was good about Ryland in the last, whatever X amount of years you said, is that he was good on social media.
Yes.
And I loved his concession rankings, things like that, right?
Yep.
I mean,
Yes.
just, whatever he did or whatever he called it, that was funny. And he did highlight the kid, but also, like you're saying, that's the double-edged sword.
Right.
Is that people can get in touch with him easily and say, you are a blankety blank because you ranked my school fifth instead of fourth or whatever.
Now, someone who might not love Ryland, I think they respect him, but they'll never admit it. The WIA, because Ryland was really a harsh critic of some of their choices and still is. But you know what? I have a great relationship with the guys at the WIA, I believe, and I respect what they do, and I always try to get their point of it before I write a column or something to rip on whatever. And but I love that there's someone like Ryland out there who is always going to be a harsh critic of them, and it keeps you on your toes. If you're the governing body of high school sports, somebody should be able to criticize you in a free society. So I love how Ryland did that. But I think the WI respects him, though, even if they got a little frustrated with some of his rants.
True.
Yep.
All right. So, all right. I guess, this is going quicker than I thought. So Super Bowl, we are, for right now, we're doing this once every 2 weeks. So we're recording this podcast the week after the AFC and NFC championship games. I'm still in mourning over the Chiefs winning. But let's hear from Tony and Cale. Who's going to win the Super Bowl and why? Tony.
I'm going to go Chiefs 38-28, Mahomes, Kelsey factor. That's it.
Okay.
Without getting into too many details. I know you hate that, Paul, but
well, it's quite all right.
I mean,
I hate the prediction. I hate.
Yes,
that's okay. So.
Well, Paul, you're not going to be much happier with me then, because I basically, when I'm looking at matchups like this, I look at quarterback, and I know Mahomes is hobbled, but he was still pretty incredible on Sunday.
Right.
And then I look at the coach. Not that I have anything against Sirianni, but Mahomes and Andy Reid, it's tough to pick against those guys.
Yeah, I'm a Raider fan. I know. I know how tough it is. I know how tough it is.
Hey, will they do some kind of like ring around the rosy play
and
then snap it and try to score?
That was weak. That was weak.
Weak, or it took a lot of courage because you got to play the Raiders twice a year moving forward, and I don't think they're going to forget that.
Hey, and you know what? That also might have been when the Raiders beat the Chiefs in Kansas City a couple of years ago. John Gruden drove the bus around the stadium for a victory lap. I mean,
remember that? Yes,
I love the Raiders more than anything. That was the
inevitable victory lap on the field.
Yes.
I guarantee you they didn't forget that.
I'm not mad that the Chiefs did that. I called it weak just because they're the Chiefs and I'm a Raider fan. I'm supposed to say that, but no. Hey, payback's you know what? And I'm sorry if you do a victory lap for a regular season game after you've been owned by this team for years. I don't know. I understand why the Chiefs made us look bad. So anyway, those are fine opinions, you two, on the Chiefs. But before those are smart opinions too. But mine, I present bizarro world opinions when it comes to my football. So here you go. First off, you must understand my love for the Raiders. These guys do. But my love for the Raiders trumps pretty much everything else in this world. Not everything, but almost. So when the Raiders are no longer in the hunt, which is often, my sports hate takes over. And that's what happened in these playoffs. The best thing that's happened in these playoffs, the Chargers blowing a 27-0 lead. Oh my gosh.
I agree. That was great.
That was awesome. I love it. The only thing that will top that is if the Chiefs lose. And I'm saying, please let it happen. I'm not predicting a Chiefs loss. I am hoping for mankind that the Chiefs will lose. And I think the world of Mahomes, and I believe Kelsey is the greatest to ever play his position. So this is not personal. I respect the athlete, but I hate the team. But here's another reason to pick the Eagles on Super Bowl Sunday. For mankind. The last time the Chiefs won the Super Bowl, the world almost ended. You think
the pandemic prediction.
You might think that the Chiefs winning and the pandemic were coincidental. That's your right. But I know the truth. When the Chiefs win, the world loses.
It was one of the 7 plagues.
Yes. So just fly, Eagles, fly, everyone. Fly, Eagles, fly for mankind. So anyway, we hope to do this every couple of weeks for now, and then maybe we'll be in so demand we'll do it once a week, and then eventually you guys can quit your jobs, right?
Yeah,
we'll just save us full time.
Syndication is right around the corner, I'm sure.
Thank you, Paul. I see it.
But anyway, Tony, Cale, anything you want to add?
No, I'm good. I'm looking forward to we'll get our spring training
Oh, that's right.
Next time.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I'm actually making a trip down. So.
Oh, sweet. You guys could
it'll
tell
be
me
fun.
about it. I've
Yeah.
never done that. All right. Well, this is Paul Valencia for Cale and Tony. Thanks for listening.